Well, hi everyone, and a warm welcome back to my Vintage Dirt Bike TV channel as we check out more of those long lost dirt bike classics from back in the day. Now, in our next feature clip, we are going to take a look at another British vintage classic. So I hope you'll stay with me for the next few minutes as we take a look at a 1964 Triumph Tiger Cub 200 Trials bike. Now, this 1964 Triumph Tiger Cub Trials machine was another of the very nice bikes that were on display at the 2020 Telford Classic Dirt Bike Show. Now, the bike's owner told me that this machine was actually built by the UK Trials legend Sammy Miller. Now, if anyone knows how to build a classic Trials bike, then there is no better than Sammy Miller, because Sammy has won almost every accolade there is to win when it comes to these Trials machines. Now, the owner had this machine advertised for sale at just £8,500. Now, whether the price was because Sammy actually built the bike, I'm not entirely sure, but then again, I'm no expert when it comes to these Trials bikes. Although you have to admit that it is quite a nice little looker with the steel frame and the alloy mudguards and that beautiful alloy tank. And there is certainly something about these old classic British bikes with their lovely polished up alloy and steel frames and steel wheels. There is certainly something about these old fashioned machines that just look absolutely right. Now, these 200cc Triumph Tiger Cub motors were based on Triumph's earlier 150cc Terrier motor, which was designed in 1952. Now, they're air-cooled, of course, a 4-stroke engine with a dry sump, and the motor had an iron cylinder and an alloy cylinder head. Now, of course, had a wet multi-plate clutch which was connected to the crank by a primary chain. The gearbox was a 4-speed countershaft gearbox. Now, these little Triumphs originally came fitted with an AMAL monoblock carb, although many riders, as in this case, upgraded these to an AMAL concentric carburetor. Now, back in the day, the road-going version of these Tiger Cubs were called the Baby Bonnie, in, of course, relation to its bigger brother, the big Triumph Bonneville. Now, these were pretty hardy little motors, although the earlier 200 Tiger Cub engines tended to suffer from motor failure, as the big end bearings were prone to fail if the engine was revved too hard before the motor was actually warmed up. Although in 1962 a better oil pump and improved bottom end was fitted to these engines, which of course then eradicated the problem. Although as far as maintenance goes, there are no real horror stories when it comes to keeping these Baby Bonnies on the track. Regular oil changes and just keeping on top of any little issues that may spring up will keep these little 4-banger motors ticking over nicely. But of course, this is a very nice example of one of these old classic British made Triumph Tiger Cubs, and because the bike was built by the legendary Sammy Miller, it obviously has a certain provenance when it comes to the bike's history. And once again, these bikes of course have these beautifully sculpted alloy fuel tanks. Now I'm not entirely sure who builds the tanks for these machines, but they're gorgeous pieces of kit on one of these old British bikes. Now the oil for the engine goes in the frame, and this little filler at the left hand side of your picture is where the oil is put in the frame, just like the old Brickman Matisse frames, where the oil is stored in the frame and then pumped around the motor. But this little machine is beautifully put together, and of course has all the period correct parts on it for that particular era, including of course this road going speedometer. Now naturally the exhaust system is custom made, with this being a trials machine and not a road going version of the Tiger Cub, but it's beautifully sculpted and looks absolutely stunning in this beautifully shiny chrome. Now I'm not entirely sure if these are the actual road going Tiger Cub forks on this bike, and many of these Tiger Cubs used BSA front ends, which were slightly stronger and better for these kind of trials events. Now, as with all other trials machines, of course, a very narrow profile to this machine, as you would expect with this being a trials machine. Now, whether the owner actually got this bike sold on the day, I'm not entirely sure, but the bike is fully registered for road use, so you can use the bike to go from event to event. But there are some very nice touches on this machine, including this handmade air filter housing in this beautiful alloy casing. Just looks absolutely right on this little machine. Now these trials versions of the Tiger Cub were designated the TR20s, while other models like the Scrambles versions were titled the TS20s. But the last Tiger Cub road going model was the T20 Super Cub, which was launched in 1966, which actually used parts from the very popular BSA Bantam, and this of course was done to keep the cost of the bike down to the very minimum. And I still remember in 1961 when the driving licence laws in the UK changed, which restricted learner motorcyclists to just 250cc. Now naturally, because of this, these 200cc Tiger Cubs were hugely popular at the time and were a great starter motorcycle for new riders. But this particular machine is a lovely conversion from the Tiger Cub road bike to this beautifully prepared trials bike, complete of course with the cookie tin holding up the front wheel. Although you have to admit, this little Tiger Cub 200cc motor is a very nice looking little engine, and as I mentioned previously, it was so popular with bike riders a way back in the early 1960s. Certainly a much nicer looking and more aesthetically pleasing bike than looking at a modern day trials bike with all the plastics etc. on the machine. There is certainly something about having a motorcycle with a steel frame and all this chrome and polished alloy. So there you have it, something slightly different here on my Classic Dirt Bike TV channel. A very nice 1964 Triumph Tiger Cub 200. Okay, look out for more of these old classic motorcycles coming up soon here on my YouTube channel, and if you like these kind of machines, then please continue to subscribe to my YouTube channel to see much more of these old classics from back in the day. This video was brought to you in association with WorldSport, the world's #1 supplier for all your off-road and leisure sportswear. Just visit their online website for more information.